25 years ago this month exactly, Bill and Hillary Clinton took control of the Democratic Party, and they've basically run it, with a few exceptions, ever since. It's been a long time. Here's a look back.
I still believe in a place called hope.
I accept your nomination for President of the United States.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
I can state unequivocally that, as my husband has said, these are false allegations.
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is.
Yes.
The great story here, for anybody willing to find it and write about it and explain it, is this vast right-wing conspiracy.
What difference at this point does it make?
I feel your pain.
This was the biggest nothing burger ever.
Thank you, and may God bless you and the United States of America.
If you're a recent college graduate, that's your entire life. That's how long the Clintons have been in control, a quarter century. And for decades, they've held control because they and their acolytes have ruthlessly stamped out numerous charges of sexual harassment and assault brought against Bill Clinton. Suddenly, out of nowhere, that's no longer working for them. The society-wide backlash against sexual harassment by powerful producers, actors, and politicians has finally turned and bit the Clintons themselves. Just yesterday, Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, she's the one who filled Hillary Clinton's New York Senate seat when Hillary left it to become Secretary of State, said that Bill Clinton should have resigned during the Monica Lewinsky scandal. In response, Gillibrand was blasted by Hillary Clinton's longtime spokesman, Philippe Reines. He tweeted this: "Over 20 years, you took the Clintons' endorsements, money, and seat. Hypocrite." But Senator Gillibrand is not alone in turning on the Clintons. Liberal blogger Matt Iglesias, who's defended them for years, he works at Vox, he now says the president should have resigned back then. At an event in Miami, former DNC chair Donna Brazile, also very close to the Clintons, says that Bill Clinton's accusers deserve to be heard. Where's this coming from? What does it mean other than the end of the Clinton era, finally and completely? Chris Hahn is an attorney. He spent years working for Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, a longtime Clinton ally, and he joins us tonight. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Anytime, Tucker. Thanks for having me.
I'm not going to pile on the Clintons. Actually, I'm going to say something that I didn't think I would ever say. I agree with Philippe Reines in this case. I think that Senator Gillibrand is basically treating the Clintons like the Clintons treated women. She used them, and now she's discarding them. And I think it is contemptible. Wouldn't you agree?
No, look, I mean, she's got a good opinion, and I think it's a good voice that needs to be heard. And let's face it, Tucker, I think that opinions on some of the things that happened in the 90s have evolved dramatically in this country, particularly in the last, 10 months or so. And I think that there's people looking back on what happened, not just with Bill Clinton, but Anita Hill and Justice Thomas, with a whole new light. And they are looking at the women that were involved in that.
If I were much younger, you might be able to pull that over on me, because I'd be like, really? People didn't worry about rape in the 1990s? But I was there, actually. And Justice Thomas was never accused of any physical contact of any kind. He was accused of saying sexual things to Anita Hill. We can debate whether he did or not. But he was never accused of assault in any way. Bill Clinton was credibly accused of forcible violent rape by a woman who was not a political opponent. She was a Democrat, and she told a bunch of people about it at the time, and she was attacked by fellow Democrats, dismissed by the press, and made to feel that she'd done something wrong. That was wrong then, and it's wrong now. And what I find infuriating is all these people attacked her then, and now they're like, oh, well, standards have changed. No, rape's always been real. It's always been bad.
I agree, Tucker. I mean, you're not getting any argument with me. And you look back on it now, and there's a lot of disgust when you look back at that, both from people on the left and the right, and the way things were done towards women who came forward with allegations. And I think the initial instinct that is happening now for women to be believed until they're not, is probably the right way to go. And I think we're going to see more of that. And I think it's empowering for women. And I think that we're going to see less sexual harassment in the workplace. And we're going to see women move farther up the chain, because I think having more women in power is going to stop this altogether. And I think that's a great thing for America.
That's total nonsense. That's first of all, that's nonsense. Social science doesn't back you up, and there have been studies on this, and they don't say what you say they say. But moreover, Hillary Clinton just ran for president a year ago. She's married to the guy accused of rape, and she attacked the women who accused him of sex crimes, and she didn't do it in the 90s. She did it last year while running for president, and she's still denying it. So she wanted the most powerful job in America, and she's attacking the women. So how does your theory work exactly?
Tucker, on the Clintons, I love them. I think Bill was a great president. I think she would have been a great president. They are no longer going to be the leaders of the Democratic Party. That is very, very clear at this point. In about a year and a half, we'll pick a new nominee to run for president, and he or she will be the leader of the Democratic Party going forward until they're not president or until they lose the presidential race.
No, you're right, and that's an interesting conversation. No, I agree with you, and actually, I would love to have a longer conversation about which wing in the party is ascendant at this point. But we need to, and I don't want to do a week of sex stories about the Clintons, because they're off the stage. I agree with you. I hope this is the last one we ever do.
They're gone.
I agree with you. But Michelle Goldberg at the New York Times is not gone. She has a column there. She's totally fraudulent. A fraudulent feminist. She's writing this, quote, "Because of Broderick's allegations, Bill Clinton no longer has a place in decent society." Now, we can say Bill Clinton's off the stage. Michelle Goldberg's not off the stage. She still has a platform, and people listen to her and take her seriously. Where was she a year ago? These allegations are 20 years old. Why should we let Michelle Goldberg, this ersatz feminist, off the hook for just now recognizing rape is wrong? Like, why should I forgive her for that?
I've seen Michelle Goldberg. I don't think she was writing a column for the New York Times in 1996.
She was defending Hillary Clinton a year ago. I read her stuff. She was defending Hillary Clinton. We'll have to vote for Hillary.
Well, look, Tucker, you're going to hold Hillary Clinton responsible for her husband's crimes? That's ridiculous.
No, I'm not. I'm not actually. And by the way, I'm being as honest as I can be.
Why should Michelle Goldberg?
Because all of us knew. I'll tell you exactly why. Because Michelle Goldberg and lots of other people on the left thought it was more important that they have power than that some woman get justice. Okay, fine, but you can't pretend to be a feminist simultaneously, which is what people like Michelle Goldberg, and it's not just her, it's the entire feminist establishment that covered up for his crimes because they wanted him in office. And I just think they should be held accountable for that. Not the Clintons, they're defenders.
Like I said, I think there's been a major evolution in this country, and I think that's a good thing, and I think things are going to change, and we're not going to be seeing these things covered up and swept under the rug. And that's not necessarily good for the current president either. That is not necessarily good for the current president.
People didn't think rape was a big deal last year during the campaign? I thought the Democrats were the party of women. But you're telling me they didn't take it seriously last year.
Tucker, the person who was accused of rape was not running for president last year.
His wife, who attacked the woman who accused him,
she was never accused of rape. She believed her husband. That was her crime, Tucker.
She didn't believe her husband for a second. And don't insult my intelligence. She attacked the women who accused him. I was there. I covered this in 1998, and she led the charge against Monica Lewinsky, who did nothing wrong. She was like a kid. And Mrs. Clinton is the one who said she's a stalker and a nutcase and don't believe her. She did that. It wasn't just believing her husband.
I think, look, Tucker, I think Monica Lewinsky is owed an apology by a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree.
Myself included. And I think everybody on the left and the right who attacked that woman and painted her with a scarlet letter when she was just a 20-something star-eyed person. I feel that there's nobody in my lifetime who I feel was treated worse than her politically.
I agree.
Think that's something that needs to be rectified right away.
The FBI ought to apologize to her also. They sweated her. They threatened her. She didn't do anything wrong. I mean, she did something, she was a kid. She's an intern. But I agree. There are many people responsible for wrecking that woman's life. But Hillary Clinton is one of them. And my only point is, when it was politically expedient, all these fake feminists defended Hillary Clinton. And now that she's off the stage, they're like, oh, I can unburden myself. Just kidding. He's guilty.
Well, look. I don't think they're fake feminists, Tucker. I think they were compartmentalizing some of their feelings on different things. I know a lot of women who do not like Bill Clinton to this day, and are very critical of Bill Clinton because of the Monica Lewinsky scandal, because of the other things brought up against him. And these are liberal women.
Chris, I hope that we have closed the book on the Clintons, and we'll see you back here on another topic. Thank you.
Well, I think we have. Thanks, man.
Well, the Clintons face relentless attacks from within their own party. Hillary Clinton is still questioning the legitimacy of her defeat last year. Remember when she accused Trump of not accepting his loss? She said, you're going to lose and not accept it. Well, she lost and isn't accepting it, amazingly. In an interview with Mother Jones magazine, Clinton repeated her claim that the Russians robbed her of the presidency. Watch.
What impact do you think Russian interference had in the election?
I think it was one of the major contributors to the outcome.
Do you think it was a legitimate election?
I think that there are lots of questions about its legitimacy. As we learn more about it, we know that the web of connections between people on Trump's team and Russian representatives just gets more and more dense.
Next time someone says, Alex Jones is crazy, he's a conspiracy nut. Okay, nuttier than that? Michael Graham is a radio show host. He joins us tonight. That's not in the script. I couldn't control myself. Michael Graham, look, I said I wasn't going to belabor the Clinton point, but we are tonight celebrating the end of 25 years of Clinton control of the Democratic Party. I think it's worth celebrating, and I know Democrats are celebrating along with us. But don't you think it's fair to have a reckoning, not just with the Clintons themselves, who are now off the stage, but with their defenders who are still in power, who, like Kirsten Gillibrand, who defended them until yesterday? Like, what is that?
Look, I don't even want to bother the Clintons. I'm not interested in them anymore. I'm with Matt Iglesias, who at Vox admitted, now that the Clintons are done, we can go back and consider what Bill Clinton did. Now that the politics, now that we've squeezed every ounce of partisanship out of them, let's move on.
Exactly.
It's all about the defenders. What did Kirsten Gillibrand know about Bill Clinton yesterday that she didn't know in 2011 when they were holding hands on stage, cheering and rah-rah-rahing to get her elected? What did any of these liberals know today that they didn't know then? Tucker, back in the day, I wrote a book that you were very nice to say some nice things about called Clinton and Me, How 8 Years of a Hands-Free President Changed My Nation, My Family, and My Life. And everything we're talking about today, the fat parts in addition to the cheap jokes, are all in that, but we all knew it. We all know why the phrase hooks to the left about Bill Clinton, re Paula Jones, isn't about his golf swing. We all know what kiss it means. We all know why you don't mention cigars when you're hanging out with Bill Clinton and reminiscing about the Oval Office. This is all stuff people have known for 17 years, and now there's suddenly reminted Clinton virgins going, hey, wait a minute, I think you might have done something naughty.
Yeah, I don't think that we should let people get away with that. And meanwhile, it's the same people who are always lecturing the rest of us from this moral purge as feminists, defenders of women, when in fact they don't speak for women any more than any other self-appointed spokesman speaks for any other group he's not elected to run. These people have no actual authority, and now we know they have no moral authority. So why are we listening to them?
Well, I agree with you, but it's even beyond the not doing the right thing in calling people out. They joined in the attacks. A good point that you made in that previous interview, which is why I like having you on my podcast, you make good points, Tucker, is that Hillary Clinton actually said, we must destroy her, about one of the women that was a victim of Bill Clinton. She called Monica Lewinsky narcissistic Looney Tunes. They had think about this. Imagine if Judge Roy Moore right now had a group of people called the, quote, bimbo eruptions team to handle his accusers. Hillary Clinton had one, and she's a hero of feminism. It's the people who defended that. It's Hillary for defending her husband. That's, to me, the most interesting part. Not the fact that Bill Clinton's a cad. That is very old news.
Yeah, it's old news, and it's not that uncommon. But to attack the people who came forward, especially the ones who say there was violence involved, as bimbos, I'm hardly a feminist, but I love women. I mean, I was actually offended by that at the time. I don't know if they're telling the truth, but they didn't seem to have any motive to lie, and to call them bimbos when there was no evidence they were sleazy people, like, it was totally over the top.
come on, Tucker. Everybody knew Bill did it. Come on, when he was standing there with the...
Oh, I agree. I mean, I always thought he did.
Everybody knew that, of course, he had sex with that woman and probably several others in the room if you asked around. I mean, but everybody knew it was
so
true.
Mean.
And now
that's what bothers me. I mean, look, he could have just said, I'm not, life's complicated, I'm not talking about it. And I think a lot of people would have gone with that. But instead, they got a team of lawyers and flacks to attack the women. That always bothers you. Why do you need to attack the women? Why don't you just say you're not going to talk about it? It was cruel. And they never got the credit for that they deserved, in my opinion.
No, I agree. And now what's happening is that defenders of Donald Trump and defenders of Roy Moore are looking at these feminists, so-called, and journalists, so-called, and saying, why should we care more about how these guys treated women than you as feminists cared about how Bill Clinton treated women? And it's a very hard argument to answer.
It sure is. Michael, thank you. Great to see you.
My pleasure. Great to see you, too.
The story keeps getting bigger and bigger. At some point, we hope it gets smaller and smaller. But as of tonight, Democratic Senator Al Franken remains beleaguered by allegations of misconduct. We've got the latest. But first, one last look at the collapsing Clinton political dynasty on its final night. The left is at war with itself tonight over the fate of Minnesota Senator Al Franken, one day after radio host Leanne Tweeden accused him of kissing her and taking a lewd picture that you're seeing on the screen there without her consent. Slate.com says Franken ought to resign. So does Vice and two top Democrats in the state of Minnesota. A feminist writing for the Washington Post, though, says Franken ought to stay. Mother Jones's Kevin Drum says resignation would be a gross overreaction to the offense. Ann Coulter's been around a long time, watching this kind of stuff on the American left for decades, and she joins us tonight. Ann, it's great to see you.
Great to be here, Tucker.
I assume that you know Al Franken because he's always around, he's always selling books, you are too. So what's your informed opinion on this story?
Well, technically, he's always selling books by putting me on the cover of his books. My informed opinion is, for one thing, the Democrats do not care what Republicans have to say about it, so I may as well tell you the truth of what they ought to do. I don't think any Democrats are watching Fox News, but if they were smart, they'd get rid of him. I mean, in Minnesota, he would be replaced by a much more woke Democrat, maybe Keith Ellison, most likely, more likely, a feminist. You have an actual photo here. I mean, can you imagine if that were a member of the Duke lacrosse team? The lacrosse across the country would have to be shut down. I mean, with the Roy Moore thing going on, which, by the way, footnote on that, I mean, that's getting to be like a mystery novel, the way the facts go back and forth. You think, wow, that accuser looks pretty strong, and then, except her stepson calls her a liar, and Judge Moore was the divorce judge, or the judge on her divorce case. It just keeps going back and forth. So there really is nothing resembling actual evidence in that case. In the case of Al Franken, they have an admission and I think a pretty ugly photo combined with the accuser's point. If you saw her interviews yesterday, and I think she was extremely compelling and lovely, and she's not asking for his resignation or anything else, but it was part of humiliating her generally because she didn't enjoy having his tongue stuck down her throat. And he has been very nasty to women and does have a history of that.
Here's the thing, though, that strikes me about Al Franken is he's nasty to everybody. He's an awful person who berates those below him, takes credit for work he doesn't do, is a terrible boss, the staff hates him. He's just mercurial and mean, and I've seen it myself. And, that's not a big deal until some picture comes out, you know what I mean, with him doing something lewd, which I'm, of course, not defending. But why isn't there a penalty for being awful to your staff? Shouldn't that be a resignation-worthy offense?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Tucker, because I'm a lawyer who can actually explain sexual harassment to you. Curiously, why is sexual harassment or a hostile environment, why is that against a federal law? What makes that a federal issue? Well, I never understood this, and I mean, it was like not understanding what it meant to be nearsighted until I knew that if you have perfect vision, you're both nearsighted and farsighted. Interestingly, if you harass both men and women, you have not committed a federal violation. The reason hostile environments are against federal law and part of the civil rights law, and asking only your women employees to have sex or only your male employees to have sex, is that it is discrimination on the basis of sex.
Right.
So, in fact, someone who merely discriminates on the basis of sex is doing,
which
but if
I'm
you're
against,
a
of course.
jerk to both.
But my only point is not whether it ought to be against the law, but if there's a senator, and there are a bunch of them up there, throw things at their staff, and there's this conspiracy of silence around it where no one ever says it. Like, that's awful behavior.
No.
You should not misuse your power to bully people beneath you. He has for years, and no one said word one about it. I don't know why.
No, that's true, though I do think there's a particular venom toward women in the case of Al Franken.
Yeah,
and the idea that the idea that no one talks about who the mean senators are, I promise you, as a former Senate staffer, that's all we talk about. And
Well, I wish they'd come on my show to name names.
Well, I'd like to tell you the names because I thought this was interesting. Not of the mean ones, I'll be nice. But when I was working with the Senate Judiciary Committee, absolutely 100% unanimously, the two nicest senators to their staff were, I hate to admit the first one, Teddy Kennedy and Jesse Helms.
I knew that. They were famous for that. Ann Coulter, thank you for setting that record straight. Great to see you. Well, police in New York say burdensome requirements from headquarters are making basic police work feel like applying for a mortgage. Is this any way to keep the public safe? We'll talk to a former homicide detective and someone who has studied it for years next. Toy retailer Toys R Us is bankrupt. You may have heard that. Hundreds of employees have been laid off from the company. Thousands more will lose their jobs as Toys R Us closes stores in an effort to regain solvency. Given the collapse of the company, though, it is remarkable to watch the very people who rode it into the ground argue that they ought to be awarded massive bonuses, and they are arguing that. Toys R Us recently petitioned a bankruptcy court for permission to pay out $16 million in bonuses to just 17 executives. Do the math on that. In its filing, the company said the importance of these bonuses, and we're quoting now, cannot be overstated. The company also laments, quote, the lasting and continuous stress its top executives have been placed under, presumably after having to fire so many underlings. In other words, the executives are the real victims here. Keep in mind that we didn't make any of that up and that it's not unusual at the upper reaches of corporate America when even when you fail, you get rich. There's something wrong with that. Well, police in New York City reportedly baffled by difficult new requirements that make them hesitant to stop and search suspected criminals. According to the New York Post, cops compare the paperwork required after every stop to applying for a mortgage, and not in a good way. Some cops say they're afraid to stop anybody because they figure police brass won't support them in a controversy. Ted Williams is an attorney and a former D.C. homicide detective, also worked for the feds. Heather McDonald is the author of the book, The War on Cops, How the New Attack on Law and Order Makes Everyone Less Safe, and they both join us tonight. Heather, first to you. Crime is going up in certain parts of the country. That seems obvious, not just the murder rate, but the armed robbery rate, for example. Is this part of the reason?
Absolutely, Tucker. Cops across the country are deciding it's better to just drive on by that guy hanging out on a known drug corner at 2 a.m. hitching up his waistband as if he has a gun, because for the last 3 years they've been living with this specious Black Lives Matter narrative that says that that type of essential constitutional proactive policing is racist. They're worried about getting caught on a cell phone video having to use lawful force to subdue a resisting suspect, and they don't have to make those stops. Those are purely discretionary. And we've had a 20% increase in our murder rate in the last 2 years. Victims overwhelmingly black. An additional 1,800 black males have been killed in the last 2 years compared to 2014.
Right.
So this depolicing is a very serious problem.
Well, it hurts the people who live in those neighborhoods who are not rich policymakers. policymakers. So, Mr. Williams, you've been on the retail end of this. You've been a cop. If you felt like you were under this kind of scrutiny and that you might be sued for stopping someone, would you be less likely to stop people?
I would be clearly less likely to stop someone. And let me say, this kind of political correctness, I believe, is going to get some law enforcement officer killed. Just yesterday, in Baltimore, Maryland, a father of 5, Sean Shooters, stopped a guy and was shot in the head, and he's now dead. Police officers have to make split-second decisions, and you cannot micromanage police officers. And I'm just really upset with the manner in which New York is trying to micromanage their police officers, and they don't have the backs by their supervisors, don't have their backs, and that is very troubling.
And it's obvious, and it's not just in New York, it's in a lot of other cities, including Chicago. Heather, there's got to be a way to work against or try and stop the abuse of power by anybody in authority, because it's always wrong, but at the same time allow police to keep crime under control. Why do we have to overcorrect so dramatically?
Well, first of all, obviously officers have to be accountable, and we need transparency. So some sort of oversight is absolutely essential, but we have had that oversight. There is no evidence that we have had a problem with systemically racist policing. I think the Trump administration is doing a good job in trying to turn the narrative around. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has sent a strong message to federal law enforcement that he wants them to put a priority on prosecuting violent crime, putting people away in prison, which is not something that was going on under Attorney General Eric Holder. At a local matter, police chiefs have to let their cops know that they are going to tell the public what the crime data is, and that police going to where people are most being victimized, which is tragically in black neighborhoods, is not going to get the cops in trouble.
Right. So, Ted, I mean, when I was a kid, cities were depopulating because of crime. Do you think people have forgotten what that was like?
Yeah, I think we are in a different time right now, and you're finding that, especially in predominantly black neighborhoods, good people are fearful just to come out into the neighborhood because they don't know the difference between whether good police officers are going to be there to help them out or whether the crook is their best friend. And what I am saddened about right now is to try to tie police officers' hands. There's a case constitutionally, Terry versus Ohio, that dealt with stop and frisk. And the Supreme Court has given police officers the right to stop someone if they're in fear of their own safety. They can do a pat down and they can even go in. And now we seem to try to erode even Terry versus Ohio, and you're putting police officers' lives in danger.
So, Heather McDonald, really quickly, where can you get crime statistics that you can believe? It feels like they're politicized and there's a lot of lying about them. How can you find out what the crime rate is in your city?
Well, New York actually does a pretty good job of publishing crime data, and what we know is that a black New Yorker is 50 times more likely to commit a shooting than a white New Yorker. That fact means that we are going to have more stops in black neighborhoods. That's not because the police are racist, it's because they're trying to save the lives of those thousands of people that are living there. As Mr. Williams rightly says, the majority are law-abiding. They want the police, they want protection, and the public should know what these massive crime disparities are, which is what is responsible for policing in different neighborhoods.
Yeah, so normal people can be protected. Ted, Heather, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Why has a lawyer for the Las Vegas shooting victims been prevented from entering Stephen Paddock's hotel room? That and new information on that investigation, which is still full of mysteries as of tonight. That's next. New developments trickling in the, excuse me, in the aftermath. Whoa, I got something in my throat, excuse me, of the Mandalay Bay mass shooting in Las Vegas. Perrier, ladies and gentlemen. A month and a half later, MGM has finally added 24/7 security to its elevators. That's a welcome move. But there are other strange things going on. I beg your pardon. Catherine Lombardo is a lawyer representing the victims. She's been trying to gain access to the room but hasn't been able to speak on live television. We're letting her speak tonight. Catherine, thanks a lot for coming on. And I beg your pardon.
Thank you very much, Tucker.
Thank you.
That's okay. Take a breath and a drink, and it'll pass.
It has. Thanks so much. So you are representing the families of victims and victims themselves, and you're trying to gather information, basic information about what happened. But there are roadblocks in your path. Tell us who's setting those up.
There certainly are some roadblocks, and I certainly don't want to throw anybody under the bus or say anything bad, but I can tell you that we are meeting nothing but resistance. The legal maneuvering and the posturing and the litigation that's been happening so far, we're not getting cooperation from MGM. I wish that we were. And so, unfortunately, now we have to go back into court next week or perhaps the first week of December to ask the judge to sign the order to allow us back or to allow us into the shooter's room on the 32nd floor and also to inspect the 32nd floor, the elevator banks. We thought we had this all dialed in and in the bag. As you know, we went into the venue a few weeks ago, but unfortunately, nothing but stall tactics.
What could possibly be the rationale for that?
Well, I don't know. I suppose maybe you'd have to ask the lawyers for MGM. It was a done deal. But the stall tactics, there's always an excuse. And so we're tired of waiting, and we're going to go into court and ask the judge to take charge.
So do you know how Paddock got into a freight elevator? That's a pretty basic question. Have you got an answer to that?
We are getting the answer to that. My own investigators are on that. I think I have an inkling of the answer, but of course I can't really explain it yet or reveal it yet. But there are many theories. I would suggest that probably staff allowed him into the elevator and helped him call the elevator up.
And do we know why they would have done that?
Well, our suspicion, of course, I can't reveal what we know so far, but our suspicion might be that because he was a heavy roller, or a high roller, I'm sorry,
right.
And because he was well known in Las Vegas. All of the casinos knew him. He was a high roller. He was a familiar face. He lived there just outside of Las Vegas.
Right.
So I think that they probably thought there was nothing unusual about it. Maybe, I don't know, but certainly we will reveal that there was something very unusual about his activities.
Do you know if the FBI had him in their sights at any point in the years preceding this massacre?
Very interesting question, Tucker. I learned something today, but I haven't secured the solid evidence that I need to answer that question yet. So if you can ask me that after a few weeks, I think I might have an answer for you.
Do you think it's possible? I mean, it seems a basic question. We've seen this in a number of massacres like this. Omar Mateen, for example, was under FBI surveillance. And I think it's a meaningful question.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't, let me rephrase it by asking you, has the FBI addressed this question directly in public?
Oh, no, of course not. As you know, and as we discussed last week, the FBI and the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department, they are conducting their criminal investigations, and they have not shared any information with us yet so far. I am expecting at least one report. It's probably in the mail to me right now. We have been seeking those records, that information, but no, the FBI has not yet revealed to us. I suspect that, yes, they did know who he was.
That would not have bearing on the investigation. It's a simple question. Did you know about this guy? Had you had him under surveillance? Were you aware of him? Had you looked at his bank records? Were you aware that he was stockpiling weapons? I mean, those are questions that they would only not answer if they were covering themselves, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do. They've gone radio silent, and they are hunkered down conducting their own investigation. We won't know for many, many months, which is why I launched my own investigation with my team of lawyers throughout Texas and Las Vegas. We're getting some answers.
All right. Well, we're coming out to Vegas in a couple weeks, and I think we'll see you out there. Thank you very much.
We'll see you there. Thank you. You're welcome.
As you just said, we plan to continue investigating this massacre every Friday until answers come in. Of course, any breaking developments, you'll hear them first on the show. Could transracial be the new transgendered? A white man says he wants everyone to treat him like a Filipino woman. He found someone who thinks that's fine. She'll be here next. Rachel Dolezal appeared on the national stage more than 2 years ago, and since then it has felt inevitable that others would follow her lead. And now it's finally happening because, of course, it's 2017. Adam Wheeler is his name. He was born a white male. As an adult, though, he became transgender and then kept going. He now identifies as a Filipino woman. Wheeler changed his name to Jadu. He travels around Tampa, Florida in a tuk-tuk. It's a kind of motorized rickshaw common in Manila. Kathy Rue is founding publisher of Catalina Magazine, and she joins us tonight to sort this out. So, Kathy, I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
I'm a little out of it when it comes to what's acceptable and not on the left, and so you're kind of our spirit guide, our shaman.
Thank you.
Our Sherpa for this journey to the heart of insanity. Is this okay or not?
This is totally okay. It's very American to be who you want to be. This person has the freedom to be who she wants to be, and she wants to be a Filipino woman. So that's okay.
That's okay.
Yes.
So that means that physical reality is no longer kind of a limit to our aspirations. So if a white man can become a Filipino woman simply by saying so, then could I become, I don't know, a successful hedge fund manager or an NBA star?
Absolutely. According to Jadu, which is her name, it's what's on the inside that counts, not what's on the outside. So there's a growing movement. There's many people that are now identifying themselves as the other gender and as another culture or race or ethnicity.
But this would entail some kind of power shifts here a little bit. So if I were hoping to take advantage of a college admissions program, could I change for the purposes of that?
I'm not quite sure how it actually would work for college admissions. I mean, I haven't heard of a case, but it sounds like it's accepted. It sounds like it's okay, and Jadu is not hurting anyone. Jadu is fine. If these people want to be who they want to be, that's fine.
I'm not attacking Jadu or mad at Jadu. I'm a little confused by Jadu, but I'm open-minded from California.
Right. If this person's not hurting anyone, then what's wrong?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you can look. I mean, the pie is only so big. So, for example, the federal government has all kinds of set-asides for female-owned businesses.
Right.
And they get contracts. Businesses have an advantage in getting massive government contracts if they're owned and operated by a woman.
Right.
So, could Jadu just show up, or could I say, my name is now I'm a Filipino woman, and I now qualify for this program. There are only so many contracts, so maybe I beat you out for one of them. How would you feel about that?
Well, that's fine. If you identify as a woman and you're not hurting anyone, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to be a woman, that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
Even if I got the contract over you, who was born a woman, I don't change my appearance.
You must be more qualified then. You were more qualified if you got the contract over me. But
it's not a matter of qualified. We have programs that set aside on the basis of sex.
And qualifications in that sex. And this person now wants to be part of that sex. So if you want to be part of our sex, then you're more qualified. No, it's a matter of qualification, and welcome to our gender.
Is there any limit then to the make-believe becoming real that you're describing? I mean, is there anything I can't be? If I can be a different sex, a different race, could I be a different species?
Well, if it's not hurting anyone, then what's the problem? I mean, it's very American to be who you want to be. So I think it's wonderful. I think it's beautiful. I think it's great.
We used to call it, and I'm not attacking anybody at all, but we used to say, and Freud himself, as a father of modern psychotherapy, said that would be delusional to imagine that you are something that you're not. I mean, people were institutionalized for calling themselves Napoleon, famously.
But as you said, it's 2017, so it's okay now to be transracial and transgender. We're accepting. We're an open society.
Right.
We're
so
modern
you
society.
Would not. So if you had a friend who said, "By the way, you should know that I'm Napoleon. Don't send me to Elba.
Right.
But I'm Napoleon. I'm going to invade Russia or whatever."
And that's okay. Yeah.
That would not be a sign of mental illness. That would just be a sign of personal actualization.
Absolutely, yeah. As Jadu said, it's what's inside that counts. And if I want to be friends with the person who wants to think that, that's my choice. And that's that person's choice.
Is it your choice? So that's the question. This is my final question to you. Are the rest of us allowed to remain reality-based, or are we going to be punished for not playing along with other people's fantasies? What if I say, Jadu, I'm going to call you Bob. Like, I grew up next to you. You're Bob then. You look like Bob now. Should I be punished for calling Jadu Bob?
Well, no, I think that's the beauty of it, that Jadu can be who Jadu wants to be, and you can be who you want to be. So that's the beauty of our country. You can be who you want to be.
Wow. This is an elaborate defense of Elizabeth Warren, clearly. You just mounted. It's like totally demented. But I appreciate
Thank you
giving us the new rules. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you. No problem.
Well, we're going to close out this week, as we often do, with an inspirational message from the Poet Laureate of CNN, Chris Cuomo. Stay tuned for that. I want to close out the week with a headline we came across earlier today on the internet. It read, Chris Cuomo is a fighter. A fighter. Who is this godlike creature who lives over at CNN? We went looking for answers, and we came across this video, which is real. Watch.
It's allergy season, cold season, kids bringing home stuff from school season, but you got to do what you can to make yourself better. And here, and what you see is your spirit, and right here. Keep working, keep working. Keep working. See you in the morning.
I'll be honest. We started this to make fun of Chris Cuomo, but somewhere along the way, we fell in love with things like that. It's a prose poem. Haiku. Chris Cuomo, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for ending our week on that note. That's about it for us. Every night at 8, the show that's the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Have the best weekend, and we're going to see you back here at 8 o'clock p.m. from Washington, D.C. Sean Hannity's next. See you then.